The dungeons beneath the Red Keep were cold, damp, and smelled of rot. Chains clinked softly with every shift of Ned Stark's weight as he sat against the rough wall, wrists shackled. His beard had grown long, his face hollow. Time had lost meaning here, no windows, no sun, no stars. Just silence and darkness. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, the scene in the throne room, Cersei's smirk, Joffrey's voice echoing like a hammer. "Bring me his head," the boy king had said. But that hadn't happened. Not yet. He had confessed to treason. Lied, to protect his daughters. Sansa still believed in the crown. Arya, Seven help her, was missing. Varys had promised mercy, promised that bending the knee would save them all. But mercy, in King's Landing, was just a word, empty and twisted. Ned had one last choice. He could still demand trial by combat. It was his right. Even a traitor could call for it. And he had thought about it. Gods, he had thought about it endlessly. But why hadn't he done it? The answer was not simple. It wasn't fear of death, he had never feared that. It wasn't about honor either, though it had always guided him. The truth was darker. More personal. He remembered the talk with Varys the night before his confession. The spider had slipped through the shadows like he always did, voice calm, steps silent. "You must think about your daughters, Lord Stark," he had whispered. "The Queen is cruel, but not careless. Your honor cannot save them. But your silence might." Ned had clenched his fists. "So you want me to lie? To kneel before that monster and pretend I betrayed Robert? That I plotted against the throne?" "It's not about you," Varys had replied softly. "It's about Sansa. About Arya. If you choose to die with your pride intact, what will become of them?" The word struck deeper than any sword. Because Varys was right. Choosing trial by combat would have meant trusting his fate to a fight, either his own, or a champion's. Ser Barristan was gone. Ser Jaime was in the dungeons. Who would fight for him in a Lannister-controlled court? Bronn. A Sellsword wouldn't stand against the Mountain or the Hound. And even if someone did fight for him, what then? The trial would be bloody. The Crown would call their own monster. If Ned won, it would shame Joffrey. Humiliate the Queen. Would they let his daughters walk free after that? He doubted it. Cersei wasn't a woman who forgot slights. She'd watched her husband die with a cup in his hand and a smile on her face. Ned Stark winning a trial would be an insult she would never forgive. And if he lost? He'd die a traitor, and his family would suffer for nothing. No, demanding trial by combat was too dangerous. Too selfish. That was the moment he truly understood the cost of honor. Now, sitting in the dark, Ned didn't regret choosing the lie. He regretted being forced into it. Regretted trusting Littlefinger. Regretted not leaving King's Landing when he had the chance. He'd played a game he never wanted to join, and lost. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the stone hallway. The guards returned, spears in hand. Ned rose slowly, the weight of chains dragging behind him. "You're wanted above," one said gruffly. "The court awaits." "Is it time?" Ned asked, voice low but calm. The man didn't answer. Just unlocked the cell door and yanked the chain. Ned Stark took a breath. Maybe this was the end. Maybe the mercy Varys spoke of was a lie too. But at least he had tried to protect his children. That had to mean something. As he stepped into the dim torchlight of the corridor, his knees heavy, his heart slow, he thought again of that one burning question. What if he had chosen combat? Would things be different now? Would he be walking to freedom instead of judgment? But then he remembered Sansa's letter. The fear in her words. The trembling handwriting. He had made his choice. For them. And there was no turning back. The hall was quiet as they led Ned Stark through the Red Keep. A strange, unnatural quiet for a place filled with whispers and treachery. His boots dragged over stone, chains rattling softly behind him. He kept his head high, despite the weight on his shoulders. He was still a Stark of Winterfell, even if the world had forgotten. The Iron Throne loomed in the distance as he entered the great hall. It was just as he remembered, sharp, cold, and cruel, like the city that surrounded it. Sansa stood near the steps, pale and trembling. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw Catelyn in her face. That broke him more than any chain. Joffrey lounged on the throne, wearing a crown too large for his head and a grin too wicked for his age. Beside him sat Cersei, eyes like daggers, watching every breath Ned took. Behind them stood the small council, Grand Maester Pycelle, Lord Janos Slynt, and Lord Varys, the spider who had whispered mercy in the darkness. Ned's legs ached, but he stood tall as they forced him to kneel. The floor beneath him was slick, polished like a mirror, but stained with the memory of blood. The crowd watched in silence. Lords and ladies, knights and spies, all of them hungry for a show. Some looked away in shame. Others stared with open hatred. In King's Landing, honor was weakness, and weakness was death. Joffrey rose, voice high and shrill. Eddard Stark, you stand accused of treason. What say you? Ned looked at Sansa. Her lips quivered. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded slightly, almost too small to notice. But he saw it. He turned back to the throne. I am Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell. I was hand of the king to Robert Baratheon. I confess, he said, voice strong, even though every word tasted like ash. I betrayed the crown. I conspired to place Stannis Baratheon on the throne. I acted against the will of the rightful king. Lies. Every single one. Gasps echoed through the hall. Not all were surprised. But all felt the weight of it. The mighty wolf had bowed. Winter had knelt. I beg mercy, Ned continued, locking eyes with Joffrey. Not for myself, but for my daughters. They are innocent of my crimes. Cersei gave a slight nod, small, satisfied. This had been the deal. Confess. Kneel. Be sent to the wall. A life spared in exchange for obedience. Varys had promised it. Sansa had pleaded for it. But promises meant little in a city ruled by a child and his mother. Joffrey looked down on him with a twisted grin. Is that all? He asked. No demand for trial by combat? No brave last stand? The words hung heavy in the air. Ned said nothing. He just stared back. Joffrey stepped forward. My mother says you should be sent to the wall. That you've shown humility and regret. But I am the king. And a king must show strength. Cersei's smile faded. Bring me his head. Time stopped. For one breath. 2. Ned didn't even blink. Sansa screamed. Guards moved to hold her back as she collapsed in tears. Cersei stood, furious. He confessed. You swore. But Joffrey was already walking back to his throne, smug and gleeful. Ned didn't fight as they grabbed him. He didn't beg. Didn't plead. He looked toward the crowd. Toward the sky, blue and distant through the open roof. He felt calm. He thought of Arya, wherever she was. Thought of Robb in the north. Of Jon, beyond the wall. Of Winterfell, quiet in the snow. And he wondered, had he been wrong? Should he have demanded trial by combat? Faced the crown with sword instead of surrender? Maybe. But it was too late now. As Ser Island Payne drew his sword, Ned whispered something no one heard. He wasn't praying. He wasn't cursing. He was saying goodbye. Arya was in the crowd that day. Hidden among commoners, dressed like a boy, dirt smeared across her face. She hadn't planned it. She hadn't known what she was going to see. All she knew was that something was wrong. She could feel it. Her father was being brought out into the open, and the city smelled like death. Yoren, the recruiter for the night's watch, had found her just moments before the blade fell. He'd seen it in her eyes, the wild panic, the disbelief. "You don't want to watch this," he'd said roughly, grabbing her by the shoulders. "But that's my father," Arya had whispered. "And that's a monster on the throne," he replied. "Look away." But she didn't. Not in time. She saw her father's eyes, calm and distant. She saw the sword, long, heavy, unforgiving. And she saw it fall. The crowd roared. Some in shock, some in delight. The nobles gasped, and even some knights turned away. Cersei screamed at Joffrey, her mask of power slipping for just a second. But none of it mattered to Arya. The world had narrowed to one single point, the stone steps, stained red. Then Yoren dragged her into the shadows, his grip iron strong. "Come with me now. Don't speak. Don't cry. Just move." And she did. Somehow, she moved. Through back alleys, dark corridors, out into the filth of the city. She ran, tears burning but never falling, because she wouldn't give them that. She wouldn't cry, not now. Not yet. The sky over King's Landing was blue that day. Clear. Almost cruel in its peace. Far away, in Winterfell, a raven brought the news. Maester Luwin read the message aloud to Bran, who sat in his wheeled chair, wrapped in furs too big for his thin body. The words were short. Cold. Eddard Stark, traitor to the crown, has been executed by command of King Joffrey Baratheon. Let it be known. Bran didn't speak. Didn't move. He just stared ahead, jaw clenched. Rickon cried. He didn't understand, but he knew something terrible had happened. Shaggy Dog, his black dire wolf, howled into the wind as if the world itself had been wounded. Bran whispered, "He's not a traitor." And that was all he said. In Robb Stark's war tent near the twins, the message came by rider. He read it once, then again. The parchment trembled in his hands. He didn't speak for a long time. Catelyn watched him, her face pale, her eyes burning with fury. "He confessed," she said finally, voice shaking. "He did it to protect your sisters. That was the only reason." Robb slammed his fist into the wooden table. "Then the boy king has no honor. No mercy." "The boy king is not the one pulling the strings," she replied. "It's the queen. It's Tywin. It's all of them." Robb stood, taller than his father had been, but younger than he'd ever felt. "We ride at dawn. I don't care about peace. I don't care about titles. They've spilled Stark blood. There's only one answer left." The bannermen outside didn't know what had happened yet, but they would. And when they did, they would howl for vengeance. The North had lost its warden. Now, it would raise a wolf. In King's Landing, silence followed the spectacle. For days, the court was uneasy. Even the Lannisters felt the tremor. Cersei kept to her chambers, furious with Joffrey. She hadn't wanted Ned dead, not yet. His death had ruined the plan. There would be no bargaining with Robb now. No peace with the North. Varys moved quietly through the shadows, disappointed. He gave up everything, he murmured to himself. And the boy still took his head. So much for mercy. Littlefinger, on the other hand, smiled. A dead wolf is still a dead wolf, he told himself in the mirror. Now we'll see how the pups behave. But deep down, even he knew, Ned Stark's death wasn't the end. It was the spark. And far beyond the walls of Westeros, across the narrow sea, a young queen with silver hair heard the news from a whispering trader in the market. "Eddard Stark is dead," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. Daenerys Targaryen turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. What did you say? Beheaded in King's Landing. By the boy king. She said nothing, but later that night, as she stared into the fire, she felt it. The pieces were moving. The game was changing. A loyal man had died, and a kingdom would bleed. Let the lions fight their war, she whispered. When they're weak, I'll cross the sea. Arya didn't speak for days after her escape. Yoren kept her hidden among the new recruits bound for the wall, cutting her hair short and smearing her with grime. She looked like just another orphaned boy now, filthy, hungry, and forgettable. That's what kept her alive. The stink of sweat and piss from the cage carts surrounded her. Rats scurried underfoot at night. Food was scraps, water even worse. But Arya didn't care. She barely blinked, barely breathed. She kept her head down, just like Yoren told her. He tried to talk to her once, on the second night after they'd left the city. You've got fire in you, girl, he muttered, chewing on a piece of dry meat. But if that fire shows, they'll stamp it out. You understand me? Arya nodded, silent. You keep your name close. Don't let anyone know who you are. I'm Arry, she said flatly, her voice cracked but steady. Arry the orphan boy. Yoren grunted in approval. Good. Arry's got a better chance out here than Arya Stark. But inside, Arya wasn't forgetting. She replayed the moment over and over again, her father on his knees, the sword falling, the scream caught in her throat. She had seen his eyes before it happened. There had been no fear there. Just something sad. Something final. And under all that grief, a small ember started to burn. She whispered the names at night, like a prayer twisted into a curse. Joffrey. Cersei. The Hound. Island Pain. Meryn Trant. Every name, a weight. Every name, a promise. In the Red Keep, Sansa's world was crumbling. At first, she couldn't believe it. Her father had confessed. He'd done what they asked. They promised mercy. She had begged, written letters, knelt before Cersei, swallowed every word they forced her to say. But it hadn't been enough. Joffrey had smiled when he gave the order. Smiled. That smile haunted her now. They let her remain at court, but it wasn't kindness. It was cruelty with pearls. She was dressed in silks and gold, paraded like a prize, spoken to like a pet. But her cage was just as real as Arya's. Maybe worse. Joffrey took pleasure in her pain. He made her look at her father's head, mounted beside Septa Mordane's, and asked her if she still loved traitors. Sansa wanted to scream, but the words turned to dust in her throat. Your brother is marching south, Cersei told her one day, voice cold but calm. You'd best pray he knows when to stop. Sansa didn't answer. She'd learned by then that silence was safer. But in her heart, something was changing. She had come to King's Landing a girl, dreaming of knights and songs and love. Now, she saw the truth. Knights lied. Songs ended in screams. Love was a weapon in the wrong hands. And she was alone. Far to the north, Robb Stark stood at the head of his army. Snow hadn't yet fallen, but the wind carried the bite of winter. His bannermen, Great John Umber, Roose Bolton, Rickard Karstark, gathered around the war table. The map was stained with wine and fury. Pieces moved like blood on ice. He was murdered, Robb said. They promised mercy. They gave us death. They'll pay, Karstark growled. All of them. They took your father's head, said the Great John, slamming his fist on the table. We take their kingdom. But Robb wasn't thinking of thrones or crowns. He was thinking of Arya and Sansa. He was thinking of his mother's face when the raven arrived. He was thinking of his father's last act, not as a warrior, but as a father. He chose to lie, Robb said quietly. To protect them. He died for us. And now we live for vengeance, Bolton added smoothly, his pale eyes watching Robb too closely. But vengeance wasn't enough. Not for Robb. We ride to war, he declared. But we don't fight for revenge alone. We fight because they think the North is broken. That we're weak. That we'll kneel. He looked up at the gathered lords, his voice rising. We are not broken. We are wolves. And the North remembers. A howl echoed from the nearby hills as Grey Wind lifted his head to the sky, as if answering the call. Back in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister slammed his goblet onto the table, wine spilling across the maps. That boy of mine, he growled. He's a fool. Killing Stark was a mistake. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. The North is already marching. They'll come with fire, Tywin snapped. We should have held him. Used him. Now we've created a martyr. Littlefinger only smiled from the corner. Sometimes martyrs are more dangerous than enemies. Cersei entered, face tight with fury. My son listens to no one. Not even me. Then it's time he learns, Tywin said coldly. Send for him. It's time he understands what it means to be king. But it was too late. Ned Stark's death had already set the realm on fire. The North moved like a storm. Robb Stark, though young, proved to be more than just a grieving son. He listened, he watched, and when the moment came, he struck. The banners of House Stark were raised high, the direwolf howling above fields that once knew only peace. But now the wolves were marching, and they were hungry for justice. Their first victory came at the Whispering Wood. Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, golden and arrogant, was leading the vanguard of the Lannister army when Robb set his trap. A feint, a sudden night ambush, silence broken only by steel and screams. Jaime fought like a lion, cutting down men like wheat, but even lions bleed. He was captured, dragged from his horse, snarling like a beast in a cage. When Robb faced him, he said only one thing. You killed the king. But not my father. Jaime just laughed. Your father died for honor. That's the dumbest reason to die. But Robb didn't respond. His face was carved from northern stone. He wasn't here for clever words. He was here for war. Back in King's Landing, Arya was still just Aerie, traveling with the men bound for the Wall. The road was long and dangerous. Bandits roamed freely now, some flying false banners, others wearing no banners at all. The realm was tearing at the seams. And in the middle of that chaos, Arya traveled quietly, her sword hidden, her eyes sharp. Needle was tucked deep in her bundle of clothes, the last piece of home she still carried. She practiced when no one watched, stabbing at trees, whispering her father's words. Stick them with the pointy end. Yoren kept her safe, but the farther they traveled, the harder that became. The recruits were a rough lot, murderers, thieves, rapists. She stayed quiet, stayed small. She listened. But every night, she whispered the names again. Joffrey. Cersei. The Hound. Island Pain. Meryn Trant. A list. A vow. One night, a boy named Hot Pie asked her why she never smiled. She looked at him, eyes cold, and said, because I saw my father die. He never asked again. In the Red Keep, Sansa learned how to smile. She learned to bow her head, to say thank you when Joffrey insulted her, to whisper sweet nothings to the queen who had stolen her life. It was survival. Every curtsy was a shield. Every lie was a blade she held in her sleeve. But some days were harder than others. Joffrey would summon her to the throne room and make her look at her father's mounted head. He'd ask, do you still think traitors deserve mercy? And she would answer, softly, no, your grace. Then he would smile. And she would hate him a little more. There were moments she wanted to push him off the battlements. Just one shove. But she knew what that would mean. She had no sword, no allies. Only her words. So she became careful. Clever. Cersei watched her, and for all her hatred, she saw something useful in the girl. "You're learning," she said one day. "You'll make a good queen, if you survive long enough." Sansa didn't reply. But in her heart, something was growing. Not just fear. Something sharper. At Riverrun, where Catelyn Stark had returned, the news of Jaime's capture was met with pride and dread. "You've won a great victory," she told Robb, standing over the map in his tent. "It doesn't feel like victory," he said. "I thought it would." "It never does," she replied. "War isn't a song, Robb. It's blood and mud and screaming." He nodded, silent for a moment. "Mother," he said, voice low. "Do you think he was afraid?" "Father?" Catelyn looked at her son and saw a boy hiding under a man's armor. "No," she said softly. "I think he was heartbroken. And that's worse." Robb clenched his jaw. "I won't let his death be for nothing." She stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then fight. But don't lose yourself to vengeance. Your father died trying to protect his children, not for a crown." Robb nodded. But inside, he knew that part of him, some quiet, dark part, wanted blood more than justice. Meanwhile, in a quiet corridor of the Red Keep, Varys and Littlefinger met in the shadows. "Ned Stark's death has made things unstable," Varys whispered, fingers laced. "Instability breeds opportunity," Littlefinger replied with a thin smile. "The North is rising," Varys said. "The North is always rising," Littlefinger answered. "And always falling again." They both knew the truth. Ned Stark was gone, but his death had changed the board. The game had shifted. The war had begun, not just of swords, but of secrets, lies, and betrayals. And winter was coming. Arya's journey north wasn't simple. The farther she got from King's Landing, the closer she came to danger. The land was full of soldiers now, some wore Lannister red, others claimed to serve the king, but most followed no banner at all. They robbed, burned, and killed without reason. War had turned Westeros into a wasteland where names didn't matter and mercy had long since died. Yoren tried to keep the group away from the worst of it. But trouble always found them. It happened near the God's Eye, just before dusk. A troop of gold cloaks caught up to them, riding hard, dust clouding the sky behind them. Arya had been skinning a squirrel for stew when she saw them on the ridge. Her blood ran cold. "They're looking for Gendry," Yoren whispered to her later. "Bastard son of Robert. The queen wants him dead." Arya clenched her fists. "So they'll kill us all for one boy?" "They'll kill anyone for nothing," he answered. "That's how the crown works now." The next morning, they were ambushed. Fire, steel, screaming. The wagons burned. The sky filled with black smoke. Arya fought through the chaos, cutting her bonds with a rusty blade, gripping needle with shaking hands. She saw Yoren go down swinging, cut through by 3 blades, but never backing down. He died cursing the gold cloaks to the stranger. Arya ran, pulling Gendry with her, along with Hot Pie and a few other boys. They escaped through the trees, breathing hard, their faces black with ash. That night, they buried what they could. Yoren got no grave, just stones over his body and silence from the children he had protected. Arya didn't cry. But that night, her list grew longer. Sansa, meanwhile, had learned to read people like books. She had no sword. No escape. But she had eyes. And words. In King's Landing, those were just as deadly. She studied Cersei, how she smiled when she lied, how her eyes narrowed before she struck with venom. She watched Joffrey, how he craved fear more than loyalty, how his mood shifted like the sea. Every moment with him was a test. One wrong answer and it could mean bruises, blood, or worse. Once, he forced Ser Marin to hit her in front of the court because she questioned his bravery. Her lip split. Blood spilled on her dress. But she didn't scream. She didn't beg. Later, when the court was gone, Sandor Clegane, the hound, found her in the hallway. "You keep quiet like that, you'll live longer," he said, voice rough like gravel. "I don't care about living long," Sansa whispered. "Then you're a fool. A pretty little fool. But smarter than most." He handed her a cloth for her lip, then walked away. She didn't thank him. But she remembered it. Somewhere beneath the hound's scars, something human still stirred. She would need that later. At Robb's camp, victories piled up, but so did the weight on his shoulders. He wasn't just leading men now. He was shaping the future of the North. He had sent word to the Lannisters, an offer of exchange. Jaime for Sansa and Arya. The reply came in gold and blood: "We have one girl. The other is missing. The Kingslayer stays." Robb's knuckles turned white when he read it. "They think they can play games with us," he told his bannermen. "Let's show them we didn't come to play." Roose Bolton stepped forward. "Then we strike the heart." Harrenhal. Catelyn was worried. "That castle is cursed. Burned by dragonfire. It's madness." But Robb was relentless. "Then let the dead feel our fury." The army marched again. And the songs began. The young wolf, the boy who won every battle. The son of Ned Stark, who carried his father's memory like a sword. But even Robb couldn't shake one question from his mind. What would father have done? Would he have fought this way? Would he have chosen war over strategy? Robb didn't know. But he knew he couldn't stop now. Too many had already died. Too many still would. Back in the capital, Tyrion Lannister arrived at court. His father had sent him to be Hand of the King in his place, to reign in Joffrey before his foolishness burned the kingdom to ash. Tyrion wasn't a warrior. But he was dangerous in his own way. He met with Varys first. "Ned Stark should have demanded trial by combat," he said as he poured wine. "Might have lived. Might have started the war with a sword instead of a whisper." Varys smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But then he would have died a proud man. Instead, he died a father. And look what it got him," Tyrion muttered. "Not all victories are won in life," the spider said. "Some come after." Tyrion didn't answer. But as he looked across the poisoned court, at the throne of blades and boys, he thought perhaps the eunuch was right. Ned Stark had died without a fight. But the war his death caused was only just beginning. Arya had always believed that if she was fast enough, smart enough, she could stay ahead of death. But death had caught up to her. After Yoren's death, she and the other children wandered through ruined villages and broken roads. No one trusted strangers now. Every farmstead they passed was either burned down or abandoned, and the only people who stopped to speak were the kind who carried swords too loosely and smiled too wide. Then came the men in armor, not gold cloaks, but worse. Lannister men, ruthless and tired from war. They found Arya's group near a river bend, hiding in the brush like rats. The children didn't stand a chance. They were shackled, beaten, and marched to Harrenhal, the blackened, cursed fortress that loomed like a monster born of stone and fire. Arya had never seen anything so massive and broken at the same time. Dragonfire had melted its towers, and now it stood like the bones of a dead god. Inside, there were screams. Men and women hung from cages, rats gnawed at corpses, and the air smelled of blood and piss. It was ruled by Ser Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, and Arya quickly learned what fear truly meant. She kept her head down, eyes lowered, voice quiet. She scrubbed floors, cleaned blood, hauled buckets. She never used her real name. She was still Carrie, the orphan. But inside, her list grew longer. One night, she saw a man with a face like stone, Jaqen Hagar, a prisoner in a cage. He spoke in riddles and kindness, both rare things in Harrenhal. She saved him once, from a fire. He told her she had stolen lives from the Red God, and owed lives in return. He would take 3 names, he said. 3 people, dead by her word. Arya didn't smile. She whispered the first name that night. In the capital, Sansa Stark was learning how to survive in a palace full of enemies. Her days were controlled, where she sat, who she spoke to, even how she walked. Her nights were worse, filled with fear, her bruises hidden beneath silk sleeves. Joffrey's cruelty had become routine now. Sometimes it was public humiliation. Other times, it was Ser Marentrant's backhand across her face. But she had learned the one thing no one expected from a Stark: how to lie. When Queen Cersei asked her what she thought of Joffrey, she smiled and said he was strong and brave. When Grand Maester Pycelle asked if she missed her home, she said King's Landing was where she belonged. But inside, Sansa remembered every slight. Every slap. Every name Joffrey called her. And every night, she stared out the window of her chamber, watching the city below, wondering where Arya was. Wondering if she was still alive. Once, she considered jumping. Just open the window, climb out, and let gravity do what Joffrey hadn't yet. But then she thought of Robb. Of Bran and Rickon. Of her mother. No. If she died, the Lannisters would win. So instead, she stood up, wiped her tears, and put on her best smile. She wouldn't die in this place. She'd outlive them all. Robb Stark's war was no longer just a rebellion. It had become a legend. They called him the young wolf, the boy who never lost a battle. His victories had shaken the South. Lords began questioning their loyalties. The Riverlands hailed him as their king. The North followed him not just with duty, but pride. But Robb felt none of it. Each win came with loss. Every soldier who died reminded him of the cost of honor. And when ravens brought word of Arya's capture, and the silence about Sansa, his rage only grew. Every road south runs with blood, he told his men. We will keep walking until it runs clear. But war had changed him. He began making choices his father might not have. Political marriages, bold raids, sending men to die on uncertain promises. Catelyn saw it too. You carry too much on your shoulders, Robb, she told him. I carry what he left me, he replied. He left you his name, she said. Don't let it become your burden. Robb said nothing. But he wondered if he already had. In King's Landing, the politics grew more poisonous by the day. Tyrion Lannister was trying to hold the city together with wit and gold, but even he knew that Joffrey's madness couldn't be restrained forever. You'd think a boy king would be easy to manage, he told Bronn. But this one's a wildfire in a crown. Varys warned him that whispers from the east spoke of dragons. Tyrion laughed at first, until he saw the fear in the eunuch's eyes. Meanwhile, Stannis Baratheon and Renly prepared their own wars for the Iron Throne. The realm had been cracked by Ned Stark's death. Now, it was shattering. And still, no one truly asked why he didn't demand trial by combat. Because the truth was simple. He didn't die for honor. He died for peace. But Westeros wasn't a land where peace could survive. Arya whispered her second name to Jaqen Hagar without flinching. Ser Amory Lorch. He was the man who had laughed when her friend Lamy was kicked to death. The man who had dragged prisoners by their hair. The man who didn't even see the children as people. Jaqen didn't blink. He just gave her a nod, silent, deadly. By morning, Ser Amory was dead. Poison in his cup. His lips black, his face twisted. The guards called it a curse. Arya just watched from the shadows, her face unreadable. She whispered the third name that night. But this time, Jaqen refused. The third name cannot be him. It's my choice, Arya said coldly. You said 3 lives. The name she gave him was Jaqen Hagar. He stared at her, then smiled, soft, approving. A girl has taken her first step. That same night, he helped her escape Harrenhal. Not as Ari. Not even as Arya. He gave her a coin and 5 words. Vala Morgulis. All men must die. She didn't know what the coin meant. But she held it tightly. She wasn't just running now. She was hunting. In the Red Keep, Sansa faced the ugliest truth yet: no one was coming to save her. Her brother was winning battles, but still no one rode for the gates. She was alone, a Stark in lion's clothing. But that day, something changed. Shae, her new handmaiden, a woman with secrets of her own, found her crying in the God's Wood. Sansa didn't speak, but Shae understood. You don't have to be strong all the time, she said. I do, Sansa whispered. Because if I break, they win. Shae looked at her, surprised. Then don't break. Bend. Learn their game. Learn their rules. And Sansa did. She watched Lord Baelish. She watched Varys. She listened more than she spoke. She measured her words like daggers, sharp when needed, soft when expected. One day, Joffrey struck her again in front of the court. This time, she didn't flinch. Tyrion Lannister stepped in, furious. You don't hit your betrothed in public. Joffrey laughed. She's lucky I don't kill her. Sansa looked at him and said, with a calm voice, I am loyal, my king. Always. But inside, she was screaming. Robb Stark was winning too much, and losing even more. He had captured more Lannister land. Defeated more armies. His bannermen called him the true king in the north. But then came the letter. From Catelyn. From Riverrun. Bran and Rickon are dead. Theon Greyjoy, the boy they raised like a brother, had betrayed them. Burned Winterfell. Hung 2 boys from the gates. Robb collapsed to his knees when he read it. For the first time since his father's death, he wept openly. I should have killed Theon myself, he whispered. Catelyn held him, but her own grief was an ocean. We have no home, she said. Only war now. Robb's heart changed after that. He lost a piece of himself, maybe the part that believed in mercy. Or perhaps the part that still saw hope beyond vengeance. When he broke his marriage alliance with the phrase to marry for love instead, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a wound the North wouldn't survive. And Ned Stark's legacy trembled. In King's Landing, the city braced for fire. Stannis Baratheon was coming with his fleet. Tyrion, now Hand, ordered wildfire to be readied. The pyromancers worked day and night, their green flames glowing with madness. Joffrey strutted around in golden armor he hadn't earned. Cersei hoarded wine and planned for her children's death. Sansa stayed quiet, her face calm, her eyes dead. On the eve of battle, she knelt at her window, hands folded, and for the first time, she prayed to the old gods. Not for victory. But for survival. Father, she whispered, I know now why you lied. You wanted us to live. I won't waste your sacrifice. Arya was walking a different path now. She had escaped, but she was no longer a child. She traveled with men who didn't know her name. Slept under trees. Ate with knives in her lap. She asked questions in whispers. She trusted no one. Every town she passed, she listened for word of her family. Of Winterfell. Of Robb. When she heard about her father's death again, this time from a drunk knight who called him a coward, she didn't cry. She followed the man into the woods. And she killed him with needle. It wasn't clean. It wasn't glorious. But it was hers. Ned Stark had died without swinging a sword. Without choosing trial by combat. Without fighting back. People said he died a fool. A traitor. A broken man. But those who knew better saw the truth. He died for his daughters. For his family. For peace. And even though peace never came, his death sent ripples across the realm. Arya became a ghost with a blade. Sansa became a lioness in a lamb's dress. Robb became a king forged in fire and grief. And the North remembered. Not just the man. But the choice he made. A choice that broke his honor. But saved their lives.